Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank. He's Aaron William Freeland, and this is Candid Frank Live's Leaf Talk. And, of course, we talk about other Canadian teams as well. Hope you're all having a great day. Thanks for joining us. You can follow the show on Candid Frank, the YouTube 1030. You can follow us there, and you can watch us live at 6 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, and Friday when schedule permits. So this is another week where I think the safe thing to say is that the Maple Leafs are looking good.
I think that's a very, very safe thing to say. And you know, I would just like to thank the NHL schedulers for being kind enough to schedule the Leafs a back-to-back, I believe, with travel this time around to close out the season. I think they still have 2 games remaining. One on Tuesday and the other on Thursday. One at home and the other on the road. But this past stretch has given the Leafs the opportunity to go 8-1-1 in their last 10, and they're currently on a 3-game heater. So for all of those fans out there that were losing their minds over a 3-2 loss to Florida, I need you to step back. I need you to take a deep breath and realize that the world isn't going to end. We're going to be okay. And with another victory, we can lock in first place in the Atlantic Division for the first time in the Leafs history. So,
no, they finished first, but the first time
this division,
the Atlantic Division. Yeah, you're right. You know what? I have to say the biggest thing that I'm finding powerful with the Leafs and the way they're playing, it is, in fact, we've talked about it. People predicted it with the guy that was coming in to be the coach. And they've done it. They've showed a kind of dedication to defense that this team has never shown. And for a team to do it as a whole, to actually perform defensively, your best players have to buy into it, otherwise it won't work. And it appears, you already had Tavares, you already had him, that he was pretty responsible. But the other 3, they came into the league offensive terrors, right? Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. And a lot of people would have said that Nylander was the toughest of the bunch to be responsible. I think he was the first one that started being responsible the most. He did have his off days. And, Matthews is doing his damnedest to be a good defender and killing penalties. And so is Mitch Marner. And I got to say, that's the biggest thing that makes this team different than this group in past years.
Yeah, the amount of buy-in that they've had this year from players that they needed to have buy-in from has been one of the most heartening things, I think is the best way to put it. I'm not over the moon. I'm not planning the parade, but I am at least approaching this particular postseason with a little less trepidation than I was in the past. This team does seem to have traits that will serve them well come the playoffs. One of the biggest examples of that is Domi deciding to take on Caden Gooley in the game against Montreal, that spectacular 1-0 high event hockey win. But after big hits on Bogdan McMahon and on John Tavares, Max finally said he'd had enough of him trying to physically injure some of the Maple Leafs before the postseason actually began, and decided he was going to try to take him on in a fight. Jacob Dobas has been one of the pleasant surprises for Montreal as well. He made 34 saves on 35 shots. Marner has been feeling himself lately, I think. He showed an elevated level of play on the Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada when he scored 36 seconds into overtime to give the Leafs the win. And it's one of those things where you knew Mitch always had it in him, but you weren't necessarily sure if he would capitalize on it.
I have a different review of the team. The team in that game and the Saturday game, they had a lot of, I'm going to call them floating sticks. Like they were having trouble. One of the biggest strengths of this Leaf team and the kind of players they have is they have players that are strong on their stick, Aaron, that are able to, to duel, fence for the puck, if you will. And on Saturday, the fencing skills weren't that good, not even from Marner or, and how many times did we see Matthews miss, lose a puck? Like we saw, and this sounds terrible when I say it and I hear it. When I'm thinking it and I'm hearing it in my head, I'm going, this is stupid to say, but like he lost the puck 2 or 3 times. That's in a game. He lost the puck 2 or 3 times in a game, but we're so used to him always winning those battles, right? And the point I'm making is that even in that imperfection where that part of their game wasn't as good, the defensive, I'm going back to this again, the defensive part of the game helps erase the problem that losing the puck every 3 seconds can cause.
Now, the other interesting thing to notice as well is due to salary cap reasons, the Maple Leafs were only able to dress 5 defensemen for that game, which meant for chunks of the last half of the second and part of the third period, you saw Mitch Marner out there playing defense, which was interesting. I'm going to say, not without its own issues, but at the same time, he was even and scored the game-winning goal, so you can't really fault him for that. I think the fact that they were playing with only 5 sort of highlights the defensive improvements that a lot of these guys have made to their games.
Yeah, I think you can also say that only 5 people in the arena, behind the bench, and in the management booth, there were only 5 people that were happy with that fact. The 5 defensemen, what? I'm going to have to play more? Oh no, that's so terrible. How could you put me in, coach?
Oh, my rubber arm. It's terrible that I should have to play more defense. Goodness gracious.
Put me on
The other part of this as well is Montreal was actually on the second half of back-to-back. They lost 5-2 to Ottawa on the Friday. So this was the second half of a back-to-back for them. The fact that, the Leafs managed to outshoot them for the majority of the game, is one of those things that kind of sort of reinforces the fact that at this particular point, Toronto could have given them the game, thankfully didn't. So that's another thing to
the thing of it is that we've seen so many times where you have a team that's coming in, plays a game the night before and the other team's waiting for them. We assumed always the advantages for them. We've seen it enough that it isn't an advantage. It's all about teams and how they play and how they prepare for the game. The thing that I'd like to talk about with let's see. Okay, well, talk about the Hurricanes game so we can move on from that. That's a team that a lot of time has given the Leafs problems. And Anderson, I'm listening to the broadcast and I'm starting to hear the stuff they were saying about Anderson when he was with the Leafs, right? That maybe he's playing too much.
Yeah, there were shades of that in the broadcast. I think. I know Carolina's already clinched, so essentially this game doesn't really mean anything. At the end of the day, you're looking at a goalie who, over the course of the season, has played. He started 21 games. That doesn't sound to me like he's played too much. He did have injury issues, granted, at the start of the season. Pyotr Kochetkov has played 46 games this season. Anderson has only played 21. Spencer Martin played 7, and Dustin Tokarski played 6. When you look at all of that, it's kind of hard to say that Freddie Anderson has played too much. They did platoon him with Kochetkov, that's true. But at the same time, I'm not 100% sure exactly what it is with Freddie, but the more games he seems to get into, the worse he seems to do, and it's confusing to me.
Absolutely. Well, so they lost to Florida. All of a sudden, people are going, well, looks like the Leafs are going to not finish first. And the Florida loss was much like the Ottawa losses. For some reason, the team beats Toronto and they go on to play terrible, some teams. And these two teams, Ottawa and Florida, do that. Florida was terrible after they beat the Leafs.
No, and here it is. They beat Florida 3-2 on April 2nd. They beat Columbus 5-0 on Saturday the 5th. The sky fell in on April 8th, just a week ago, less than, when they lost to the Panthers 3-1. But then they followed that by beating the Lightning 4-3 in overtime, the Habs 1-0 in overtime, and then beating the brakes off Carolina 4-1 on the Sunday afternoon game. So you gotta try to balance everything out here and try to look at this with a slightly more even keel. This is they hit the 50 win mark. They're at 104 points. I'm struggling here to come up with a reason why so many people feel that the sky is falling every time the Leafs lose a game. So
well, it's it has everything to do with the insecurity that being a team that's had this long a history of failure, that they haven't built a very thick wall of security. But I think this team probably has more than any other proven that they can recover quick enough that the noise level is always down low because it doesn't get a chance to get bigger. So the question, Aaron, as far as I'm concerned, is the way they played and beat Montreal 1-0, amazing. That's the kind of hockey they need to play. They did it with Florida. They did it with Tampa. It's the kind of hockey that they're going to need to bring into the playoffs. Are you coming around to just saying, oh, well, if it's Ottawa, they're going to play. It's Ottawa, they're going to play. Big deal.
Well, we mentioned this last week as well. You asked me if I wanted to see their playoff lineup in the last couple of games of the season, to which I replied, it doesn't really matter to me. The Leafs are going to play whoever it is that they're going to play. As it currently stands, great. Ottawa has the first wild card spot locked up. We're not catching Washington. I mean, that's a given. They're tops of the division. So the only other thing that we have to really think about is it going to be Columbus or is it going to be Montreal in the second wild card spot for Washington to beat up on? And
Montreal's got to win, or they could have a problem themselves, because Columbus has won, I think it's 6 in a row. I think they've won 6 in a row or something like that. Yeah. So they've got to worry about Columbus catching them. And I don't know if you're a Leaf fan, you want them to play Columbus.
I remember the last time we played them in the playoffs. Sorry, the play-in round in the bubble season. Wasn't happy about that. I'm looking at this here. Columbus needs to win both games, and Montreal needs to lose both of their games in order for Columbus to make it in. At this point, if Montreal comes out of it with 2 ties, they're in. If they come out of it with 1 win, they're in. Again, 2 wins, obviously, they're in that scenario. It's a little bit easier to predict on this side. I would like to see Montreal close it out sooner rather than later, meaning that we would have 6 of 7 Canadian teams, potentially 6 of 7 Canadian teams in the playoffs.
That requires Calgary to.
Well, Calgary's got 2 games left on St. Louis. They're 2 points back. So, I realistically, I think Calgary can do it. And I would like to see 6 of 7 Canadian teams in the playoffs.
That would be awesome. I'd love to see Calgary get in. That would be incredible. It would mean, though, that there would be Canadian teams meeting Canadian teams, which, on one hand means you lose a Canadian team, but it guarantees a Canadian team will be moving forward. I'm hoping anyway that these playoffs are as interesting as they're being set up to be. Let's go over to the Habs and they inch closer to the playoffs.
Yeah, so even in losing to the Leafs 1-0 the way that they did, getting that point in overtime was definitely a positive. Uh, that allows them to sit on 88 points, 5 clear of Columbus with 2 games left on their schedule. Um, Martin St. Louis said he was really proud of the way that the guys played. It's a big point for our group, and not just the way we got the point. We got to fight a little bit and played with a lot of heart. The fact that they also lost to the Senators on Friday is a bit of a stumble for them. But at the end of the day, I have faith that they'll be able to put it together and get themselves the points that they need.
Got Stützle scores twice, including the OT winner. The Flyers lose to the Sens 4-3.
Yeah, it was a Sunday afternoon game. Thomas Chabot chipped in with a goal and 2 helpers, and the Senators officially nailed down the top wildcard spot in the East with that. By not winning in regulation, they now cannot go any higher or lower in the standings. Now, Ottawa usually thrives when they score first, but when they found themselves down in the second period after Nicolas Deslauriers scored to make it 1-0, it kind of pointed out a bit of an issue with the Senators' defense. I mean, if you lose track of a player like Deslauriers, that's like losing a whale at SeaWorld. It's kind of hard to miss him. So, but early in the third, Pinto floated a saucer pass to Fabian Zetterlund, who managed to tie it at 2. Garnet Hathaway scored from a bad angle. Angus Crookshank set up Thomas Chabot to tie it, and then that was all she wrote from there. Stützle one time to perfect pass from Drake Patterson to win it. So congratulations to the Sens on locking that down and getting the points that they need.
How about the Jets?
Well, less than 24 hours after clinching the President's Trophy by beating the Blackhawks 5-4, they turned around and lost to the Oilers 4-1 just a day later. Ups and downs. Glad they got the job done. They're not necessarily going anywhere. This is one of those times where they can afford to rest a few players. They can't afford to lose games because they've got the President's Trophy locked up. They've got first place in their division locked up. The only thing they have to do now is worry about falling into bad habits if they let themselves lose.
Absolutely. The Flames beat the Sharks, and I like the way the Flames look. They're looking really good, and what a way to get into the playoffs if they can do it. The momentum that they're creating will be scary for anyone that they're playing.
No, this charge up the standings late in the season for them is doing absolute wonders. They've been 5-2-3 in their last 10. They're currently on a 2-game winning streak, 2 games left. 2 points behind St. Louis. Now St. Louis is 7-2-1 in their past 10, so there's that to contend with as well. But St. Louis has a lot of momentum going in here, but they only have 1 game remaining. The Flames have 2, so there is the opportunity here for them to get in.
The Jets fall 4-1 to the Oilers.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where Corey Perry had a goal and an assist. Connor McDavid had 2 assists. Edmonton has now won its 3rd straight to close within 2 points, of the Los Angeles Kings for 2nd place in the Pacific. The Oilers and Kings are going to play on Monday night. That's tonight, with home ice advantage yet to be determined. Connor Brown, Adam Henrique, and Victor Arvidsson also had goals for Edmonton, and Skinner made 17 saves on the back end. This is his first start after missing 8 games because of a head injury. Alex Iafallo scored for Winnipeg, and Eric Comrie stopped 35 shots. The Jets are going to be ending their regular season at home against Anaheim on Wednesday night.
And finally, Zuccarello scores an OT. The Wild edge the Canucks. Wild moving on to the playoffs. The Canucks, not so much.
Yeah, that win helped put the final nail in the coffin, unfortunately, for Vancouver. Matt Zuccarello scored a .247 in overtime. Kirill Kaprizov sprung him for a breakaway, and he made no mistake before wrapping a shot in past Vancouver goalie Kevin Lankinen. Now, they were originally down 2-0 midway through the second after the Canucks got goals from Marcus Pettersson and Jake DeBrusk. But Brock Faber got Minnesota on the board 22 seconds into the third with his 10th this season, and Foligno forced extra time by scoring midway through the final frame. This, they lost Derek Forbort, who was hurt during a fight with Jakob Trenin. He was apparently cheap shotted. I unfortunately didn't see it, and it's not covered in the highlights. But from what I've heard, his season would have been done anyways because I think he broke an orbital bone. So that is an issue. The other thing we have to consider here is Brock Besser is coming up on the end of his contract. I don't know if he'll be renewed.
He doesn't sound like he's going to be coming to Vancouver.
So
that team has totally imploded after having a great year last year. They totally imploded. That's too bad. They deserve better. The fans deserve better. I'll tell you that.
They certainly did.
Okay, so let's last few minutes here. I want to talk about some players in the Leaf lineup. First of all, center on the third line, Pontus Holmberg. He looked really good yesterday.
He did. He scored their first goal. That is definitely something to bear in mind. Certainly not one of the more lauded centers. Let's put it that way.
Well, I found him to be very good at. We were talking about being strong on your stick. Yesterday, he was very strong on his stick and using his body to separate players from the puck. And he really looked good. He looked like high energy. And if you look back at the history of the Leafs and what we've heard coming out of camp, one of the problems with him is him maintaining that level of play. You keep him out for a while, you send him back in, he plays like a demon. Well, that's a good thing because there's players that aren't going to be playing because he's playing that want to get in too, and the same could be true. So we talked last week about players being motivated, and the one way coaches have to motivate players is ice time. And he looked like he wanted to be out there, and that's what the Leaf players are going to have. The bottom six, the bottom 9 guys that are fighting for the bottom, and soon to be bottom 10 that are going to be fighting for the bottom 6 positions. They're going to have to bring it when they're put out there. If they don't bring it, they'll be gone because there's no time for a coach to say, all right, I'll give you another game. That ain't going to happen now. We're not at that point in the year anymore. In the playoffs, every game matters.
One of the running jokes out there is that Nicholas Robertson always seems to play better the day after he's a healthy scratch. So the thinking was you scratch him for game 1 and then put him in for games 2, 4, and 6. But realistically, if you want to maximize his work, you scratch him for the last game of the season and make sure he's in the lineups for games 1, 3, 5, and 7. That way, if it does go the full, you get everything out of him. I can appreciate what they were trying to do to get Bobby McMahon going again. He's had a bit of a tough slog. No, it didn't really work, unfortunately. I mean, he's showing gumption. He's showing hustle, but it's a lot of fast-moving feet, and it's not a lot of results.
He doesn't have the same rhythm he had earlier. There's something out of his rhythm. He's out of sync. He looks almost out of sync, right? Well, hopefully he'll turn things around. Going back on defense, they brought Mermis in. He didn't look out of place. He didn't look like he was causing any problems, and he wasn't giving away any pucks from behind the net.
No, and he's had a decent season down with the Marlies, so this to me was a little bit of a reward for, hey, we know you had injury issues, we know you've come in and you've done a decent job. Here's some games with some elevated pay. You may not necessarily make it into the playoffs, but because you're paid as much as you are, we had the salary cap room to shoehorn you in for a couple of games here at the end of the season. So glad to see that he had 3 shots, he had 3 blocks. He wasn't averaging that much ice time. According to the stats tracker here, in the past 10 games, this is obviously, he's averaged just over 2.5 minutes. Now, that's obviously extrapolated over the past 10 games. I believe he did have a decent chunk of playing time, somewhere in the neighborhood of 16.
Nothing. Go ahead.
But, because he's paired up with Brandon Carlo, that gives him a little more time on the back end.
But anyway, he played well. The important thing is he played well. And then even more importantly, Philippe Myers, he has, again, this is the thing about the Leaf coaching. And I blame this on the coaching. Well, blaming's the wrong word. I give credit to the coaching for not putting players in and putting them in a position where they look out of place. These players are prepared when they go in. It looks like they're prepared. They're doing the things that the other defensemen are doing. And when you have a system and players understand the system and they don't go outside the system, yeah, they kind of melt into the background. But when you're Philippe Myers and you're coming up because you're replacing somebody and you haven't played that much, it's nice to blend into the background, because that's what the coach wants to see, to be honest with you. And when it comes to defensive play, he doesn't want Philippe picking the puck out of the net. That's not what he wants him to do. So whatever he does to make his game that much better. The other guy that I question that always has one foot out of the lineup, and that's Calle Jarnkrok. He's having a hard time being in. Now, he played, but I don't know. I really didn't notice him that much. I don't know. Is that a good thing? I don't know.
I mean, it's one of those things where if you do notice him, it's because he's made an error. If the fact that you're not seeing, I like to think of him basically as a third defenseman for them, especially on that line with Lawton and Lorentz. That is supposed to be your shutdown or your checking line. So the less I actually hear about those guys, the happier I am. When he's played for the Leafs, he's been good. The question is, how much do you notice him? And honestly, the fact that we're not making more out of how he's been playing, I think speaks volumes as to what he's actually been doing on the back end. So I'm happy with the way he's playing. Can he show us a little more than just 2 assists and 5 shots in his past 10 games? Maybe. But for the role that he's being asked to play by Craig Berube, I think he's doing adequately.
You know who's looking a little better? Scott Laughton. He had a couple of really good chances yesterday. He just didn't pot them. Yeah, he's looking a lot better. He looks a little more free on his skates. He seems to open it up a little more. He was more hesitant the first few games, and I think right now he's starting to open it up, and he's starting to give himself a chance to play really good defense, but also bust out down the other end. So that's something the Leafs need. They need him to play much better. The reason they got him was for penalty killing. I know there's a lot of players that can penalty kill, especially the top 2 players on the team. They like to use Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner to kill penalties. But Lawton's a guy that's got to come in there and do the job. And he almost ended up, he did actually end up with a breakaway, didn't he? While they were shorthanded. Right?
Yep, he did. Yep.
He did what he can do, and that's important. That scares the crap out of power plays. If they know there's a guy on the other side that can get free for a breakaway while shorthanded, that you can't press as hard as you'd like.
No, and you've got to respect the offensive spark when it's there. And I think enough teams around the league have seen Lawton play for enough years that they're aware of something like that. Just gives them an additional tool in their arsenal when they're on the penalty kill. So absolutely,
yeah, he's done a good job. He's got some adjusting to do, and the adjusting is working out for him.
Most assuredly. Last word to you, Aaron. Well, at the end of the day, it's a long season. It's potentially an even longer playoffs. I'm hoping the Leafs will be able to lock it down, and hopefully we'll get past the second round this time, which will be a first for the Maple Leafs, especially if they can make it past the third. Candid Frank live 10:30 on YouTube. He's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching.